from Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary by Democrat Mark Costello, Republican Josh Cantrow, Democrat Roberto Montano, and Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Yantis, a retired Army officer. Our program tonight coming to you from our own base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Apologize for my bad voice tonight, but I've been nursing it for the last couple of days. At least I can articulate a few words tonight. And thank you very much for joining us. Lots to talk about. Lieutenant Colonel, we thank you very much. Welcome. Happy New Year. Nice to have you with us. Since we last met, the President of the United States ordered a strike, which took out General Soleimani, who was one of the major leaders of the war Iran. And my question to you is, how significant was it, and are you fearful that it's going to start a chain reaction that we may regret someday?
How significant is this action? That's going to be played out in the next couple of weeks and months. His death knocks the Quds Force operationally back on their heels a little bit. Even though his deputy has been promoted, his deputy comes from the northeast side of Iran, and he doesn't speak Arabic. He doesn't have the same ties into the Arabic community as Suleiman had. And Suleiman, for the past 20 or so years, has been the one that's orchestrated and integrated so many of the Iranian-backed militias and other terrorist organizations, giving them weapons, training, funding. And so it's going to disrupt their operations potentially.
Roberto Montano, you were a Democrat. You also served in the Army. What is your reaction to the action of the president?
Tactically, it's great. This definitely puts back an adversary that meant to do us harm. Strategically, I'd question the timing, setting aside the political implications. There were other paths, but at this point, nobody's mourning the death of this gentleman.
Josh Cantor was our Republican tonight.
I wish I heard more of what Roberto just said from House Democrats and our congressional Democrats, because they seem to be almost universally condemning this very brave action by the president, which took out this terrorist that is responsible for killing at least 600 Americans in the past, or operations that killed 600 Americans. I think it's a really good move. How it plays out, we'll have to see, but remember, Trump's base doesn't want endless wars in the Middle East, and I think that the president's track record over the past 3 years shows that he has shown great restraint.
Mark Costello was with us, card-carrying progressive. You're on the air. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm very troubled by President Trump's move, assassinating a leader of a sovereign nation sets a bad precedent. I think it's the most significant intervention in the Middle East since our overthrow, our assistance in the coup in 1953 of Mossadegh. And I think there's far-reaching implications for this, and I worry about the precedent it sets for our own official safety as well as our intervention in other countries.
You have used the word assassination. That's an inflammatory word to many. Is that the right word here in your view, Colonel?
They killed him. That's simple enough. And, you can wrap whatever word you want around it. He ceased being a force on the field.
So is that the right word to use, Josh?
No, it's not the right word to use, because it implies that we're not within our rights to kill someone who has murdered thousands of innocents over the years and spread terror throughout the Middle East.
Roberto.
I'm okay killing people that killed Americans, and that's not a Democrat thing or Republican thing. That's just an Army thing. You call it whatever you want. A lot of guys my age, I'm getting close to 50. A lot of guys my age that are artificial legs or arms that you see at the VA. This guy has something to do with that. He was involved in incidents going back all the way to '83 bombing in Beirut with those Marines. So I just don't have any sympathy whatsoever for someone who's made it their life's work to attack Americans.
Mark, sounds like we have a difference of opinion here, but one that maybe gets to the core of everybody's emotions.
Well, certainly, I mean, I have no sympathy for Soleimani, but let's invert the situation. If it was Iran who had committed a drone strike against Secretary Pompeo, for example, and said, well, he was indirectly through proxy war responsible for the deaths of innocent civilians through American actions, I think we would call it a political assassination if Iran had pulled the trigger on such a drone
I'm sorry,
strike.
but Iran is a terrorist state. The United States is not, and that is the difference. Iran spreads terror throughout the Middle East. It destabilizes the Middle East. We try to put it back together.
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that, Josh. We've got the Saudi Arabian regime that we support, which has been guilty of atrocities against its own people. It's a complicated situation, and I question, and we can disagree, but I do question whether or not we're a stabilizing force, and I do not know, as Lieutenant Colonel Yantis has pointed out, the long-term effects of such a decision as President Trump has made, apparently without deep consultation with his international partners, without involvement of Congress, which is, I understand he's the commander-in-chief, but we've elected Congress to have a check and balance.
But he does seem in this particular case, he does seem to be operating on the intelligence that was provided to him by the intelligence community, and critics of the president have said he doesn't listen to them enough. Is this an important factor here, or is he listening to only what he wants to hear?
That I don't know, but the overall scope of the operation, as I understand it, there was a very finite window of opportunity to identify which aircraft he was coming in on, that he landed in Baghdad on a commercial airliner with other innocent men, women, and children on board. He separated from them, got with his party, and then they were leaving, and then the decision was made that he was far enough away and it was not going to endanger non-combatants, innocent men, women, and children, and they took the shots.
I want to go to the consultation with Congress part that Mark mentioned. It's my recollection that President Obama, to his great credit, eliminated thousands of terrorists by drone strike. I don't think that he went to Congress every time he did that.
Yeah, and I also had, and Bruce could probably attest, that I did have problems with President Obama's targeted killings. For example, no love lost for Anwar al-Awlaki, but I was troubled about the killing of an American-born citizen. It was legally, the Office of Legal Counsel supported that move, but it does raise questions when we start allowing targeted assassinations.
All right, we've engaged the conversation, 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border. Join us. Nice to have you with us tonight.
A new exhibit from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Stay tuned. Rock on TV. Artifacts from the Jackson 5, Sonny and Cher, Elvis, Cyndi Lauper, ZZ Top, Eric Clapton, and more. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications, 360 North State Street, Chicago. From Bandstand to Gaga, let's rock on TV. For info and tickets, visit museum.tv.
Oh, hello. You know, these days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago, and Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Yantis is with us this evening. And Ryan, you were making a point during the break about the timing of how this all happened, and really looking at all the facts in this particular case. It makes a very strong case for what the president ultimately did.
Well, and General Suleiman is the outward face of the Iranians' Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the Quds Force, and they operated outside the borders of Iran in their efforts to support Shia and Iranian-backed militias and terrorist organizations. He had been doing operations throughout the Arab Crescent, had recently traveled to Beirut and into Syria, and then was traveling on a commercial airliner scheduled to land in Baghdad. And I think part of the calculus of the decision was we can't take him out if he's surrounded by innocent men, women, and children. So he's gotten off the plane. There's this window of opportunity where he is isolated on this secondary road. He's surrounded by military personnel. Nobody from the government of Iraq is there with him. Do it. And they took the shots.
Does it, a lot of those that do not like this decision by the president say that it is adding the likelihood of retaliation against American troops somewhere, someplace, or maybe high-ranking American military leaders in the United States or elsewhere. Do you think that is there a relationship to that?
You know, since 1978, 79, there has been a proxy shadow war that Iran has waged against us, the great Satan, by their definition, Russia, the lesser Satan, and a number of other countries. We have been in a profound risk from Iranian operatives, whether it's individuals traveling or official parties traveling, since that time until today.
We got hit this morning in Africa. Africa Command successfully repelled a assault from an affiliate. So that's not a new thing. But the one thing...
But are our generals, those that are at Central Command in Florida, should they be fearful of their life now?
No.
Oh.
I've been MacDill, Air Force Base, and I've been to those places. That's not the issue, but I do want to say that
Well, you said it's not the issue for whom?
The leadership, our cadre,
Yeah.
is not taking any additional risk than they were every day for the last 30, 40 years.
Okay.
We're fighting these people, right? They're trying to kill us. It's a political solution we're trying to get to through military action.
Well, and let me go real quick.
Mark got a comment.
Well, I was just going to say that strategically, you know, when Dick Cheney said we were going to be greeted as liberators, we were bringing democracy to Iraq, and now we've got a government, the Iraqi government, according to public reporting, had invited Suleiman to the country and to carry a message between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And so Mahdi has invited him, and now we've conducted this strike, further undermining the sovereignty of Iraq.
Well, maybe they won't invite any more people to their country.
Well, but so what's going to happen? So if they vote to make us leave, will the United States pull out? President Trump won't even respond to his own Congress. So I somehow doubt he's going to withdraw troops from Iraq, even if they demand it so.
Should we?
Well,
Josh, what do you think? Is this the perfect opportunity? Donald Trump said he wanted to withdraw troops. Is this the perfect opportunity? He makes a hit like this, Iraq asks him to leave, and he leaves.
Well, I think he would have to get advice from his cabinet officers and the military on what to do with that. But he ran.
Politically, what do you think politically? Politically, I would say bye-bye.
Sounds pretty nice.
Well,
Politically.
politically, his base would like that, but I don't know that the key, from a political standpoint, the key swing voters, that would be such a great move.
What do you think, Roberto? Politically.
I hate to think about this politically. I like to think of it strategically. Like, I would criticize the strategic portion of it while applauding the tactical part. Yes, we have advanced our interests tactically. Strategically, I would say there were some questions about the long-term benefit. So, for example, there's going to be an election in Iraq in February. It's likely that the people that get elected in February in Iraq are going to be less friendly. That seems to be the zeitgeist now. There was a nascent opposition group in Iran that was starting to form. They're not going to go anywhere for a while. So, like, I think of war making as a step towards a political resolution, and I think we could have done this differently. But the reason that we got stuck in this position is because we walked away from the nuclear deal. That wasn't perfect, but it was something.
Well, they've walked away from it today as well.
Well, of course they did, because we gave them very little option.
Instead of sending a pallet full of $100 bills, it was 4 Hellfire missiles from some Predator drones. The thing for the Iranian state is teetering on the edge of becoming a full-up failed state. They have taken that pallet full of hundreds and squandered it.
Right.
A lot of it went out in the Quds Force efforts to destabilize Syria and Lebanon and other countries. And there is a growing restive body within Iran that's tired of the way things are being run. Now, if we get asked to leave Iraq, okay, we leave Iraq. But they had 170 folks in their parliament out of 328 vote. It was 170 to 0. But all of those were Shias. They were all people who were bought and paid for by the Iranians.
Right.
There are still, 200 and some odd that are not Shia that have avoided that vote. They didn't answer the call. So they have a vote. It's not the vote. But if we end up leaving, okay, we leave Iraq. It doesn't mean that Iran is just going to suddenly spring forth and everything's going to be fluffy bunnies and good news. They've got big problems. The sanctions have really, really knocked them back on their heels. They have a unhappy youth that's grown up. They want good things. They want Western things, and they're stifled under a theocracy.
And that's my point.
I would say this. What President Trump has done is polar opposite of the Obama policy of appeasement, where he gives Iran $1.7 billion in cash, plane loads over it, and frees up hundreds of billions of dollars in sanctions of relief for empty promises down the road. What we have here is an administration that has put the squeeze on Iran, and whether we get out of Iraq or not, as the lieutenant colonel said, Iran has serious economic problems, and they have a restive youth. Now, the administration has said their goal is not regime change, but what the Trump administration has done is certainly put regime change on the map in terms of the Iranians doing it themselves.
I'm going to go back to something you said before, Mark, and that is from a political standpoint. Bernie Sanders also used the word assassination describing what happened. Where does this go politically? From a political standpoint, everybody's talking about what impact it has on President Trump. Does this have a positive impact on Bernie Sanders and his ability to gather and garner more enthusiasm for his campaign?
Well, what's consistent about Bernie is he's the only person running for office that voted against the Iraq War. And that's a strong position. If our country, I don't know the political pulse of our nation at this moment, but 20 years in a war in Afghanistan, and even if we do pull out the 5,000 troops from Iraq, there are still over 60,000 troops stationed in the Middle East based on U.S. Central Command's numbers earlier this year. So, but I do think Bernie has an advantage. If there's an appetite in the American public to stop spending You know, the conservative estimates, $4 trillion on these wars, and bring that money home and invest it in the American people. Bernie has a strong case to make.
Do you think the majority of those people in this country who will vote would use the same word assassination when describing the end of General Soleimani?
I think most American people want to believe that our government's acting always in our best interest. And so I think if the media comes on and the president comes on and says we've killed a bad man, an evil man, as Secretary Pompeo said, a bad man, a bad guy, most Americans, I say, would believe that and wouldn't use the term assassination. They'd say he's a threat to American interests, and that was the core.
So that by using the term, is that a political mistake? My question is.
It's honest. It's honest, and that's what Bernie's strength is he's honest, he's authentic, and people
Also
like
made
that.
political mistakes.
It
Go ahead.
really depends on who your base is. So I have a friend who says that she won't vote for anyone who doesn't use the term. And she's very politically active.
Already.
She says, I'm not voting. Her words are, I'm not voting for anyone who doesn't use the term assassination. And then, on the other hand, she and I see the world a little bit differently. I would argue that the fact that he took that vote in Iraq, is helping Biden now, because it lets people know that our strong on national security, well, listen, he's not really fired up about this, but if push comes to shove, he's willing to do the hard decision. And so I don't know that it hurts him. It depends who you're going after.
Well, the Democratic base is made up primarily of progressives, not entirely, but if you have the progressive wing against you, and there's other people that are not wanting to use the word assassination in this particular case, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that becomes the primary discussion in the month of February coming up, when Democratic primary voters and caucus goers in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada are going to the polls. Because I think they're going to be, amongst themselves, they're going to be debating the use of that term and what the president did. Does the president get a slap on the back for it or a kick in the butt? Back shortly.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room. Cleaner air to stronger markets. Factory floors to less crowded roads. Today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
The economy is not working for everybody, especially those in jobs where unscrupulous businesses keep wages lower by hiring millions of illegal workers. Those businesses could use the government's E-Verify system to prevent illegal hiring, but they refuse. What's best for the country? Let businesses continue to hire illegal workers, or require E-Verify, raise wages, and recruit left-behind Americans? See what voters want at everifyworks.com. Paid for by Numbers USA, because numbers count.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago with a horrible voice tonight to share with you. Fortunately, I've got some great guests. Their voices are much better, and one is Ryan Rientis. Who are you, Ryan?
Hi, Bruce. Delighted to be here. Ryan Yannis, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. I do leadership training and coaching. I help people come from being a good manager to being a great leader, and delighted to be here and sharing my experience.
And where have you served?
22 years, 7 months, 14 days in 33 countries, including East-West German border near the DMZ in South Korea, Bosnia in 95, Africa in 94 for the Rwandan refugee crisis.
The Pentagon on September 11th.
Yeah, the funny building with 4 walls and an extra.
All right, let's go over to Mr. Mark Casello. Professor?
Thank you, Bruce. I'm Mark Casello. I'm the Director of English and Media Communications at Calumet College of St. Joseph in Whiting, Indiana. And I'm President of the Pullman National Monument Preservation Society, working to protect the first planned industrial community in the United States.
And that's been your pet topic for many years now, right?
Yeah, going back, I moved to Pullman in 2013, and prior to that, I was interested in it as a field of study. In my major American literature, I studied labor, literature, and fiction.
And why is Pullman important?
So Pullman's important. It was the site of the first national strike in the U.S., the Pullman Strike of 1894. It was also a planned industrial community, a utopian community designed by rail car magnate George Pullman. The utopian community failed, but at the same time, Pullman had become the largest employer of African-American men, the Pullman Porters, which paved the way for the modern civil rights movement.
Josh Chantro.
Thank you, Bruce, for having me on the show again. I really appreciate it. I am a partner with a large law firm practicing in the privacy and cybersecurity space. We defend businesses when they get sued over privacy, cybersecurity, biometrics, and technology-related issues. I am also an outspoken pro-Israel advocate, Republican activist. I write in American Thinker. I have an active Facebook blog. And I guess what distinguishes me a little bit is that I am a secular Jew who is also a Republican, which is pretty rare.
Roberto Montano.
Happy to be here. Always a pleasure. Thank you. I would invite Mark to come see Pilsen, which is a phenomenal community. That's where I'm from, in Chicago. I'm a Chicago realtor, so I'm a big fan of neighborhoods. But just to brag a little bit, port of entry, survived Chicago fire. And great food. Please come see the neighborhood, and I'll sell you a house.
Now, who are you supporting for president? We should mention that Mark he's a Bernie supporter, has been, goes back 4 years as a Bernie supporter. What about you?
I think I called on this show about a year ago that my prediction is going to be Biden with the Harris VP. Right now, what I do for my activism is I go to Wisconsin and I talk to Republican voters. So I go up there and I just have a conversation.
To change their mind.
I listen to them more than anything. I listen to them. I try not to change anybody's mind, but I try to see where did we drop the ball when we did, and how can we make it right. And there's a lot of baseball left to play before the convention. We're getting a few people that are asking if they could get a second look at the party.
By the way, we should mention that Robin Johnson, who has his hand on the pulse of Iowa, will be joining us at 7:30 tonight, and we'll be talking about what's happening in Iowa. He's a professor at Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois. He's been a guest on this program before, but he's coming up. Also, if you'd like to join the conversation, the phone lines are open at 1-800-723-8289. If you'd like to email me your email, it's beyondthebeltway.com. That's all you've got to do. Beyondthebeltway@gmail.com. Beyondthebeltway@gmail.com. And also, if you want to tweet me, it's at Dumo, at DUMO. And also, if you want to go to the website, beyondthebeltway.com, you can see and hear this program in the future. And, of course, we are live on Facebook and we are live on YouTube. And, again, if you want to tweet me either a remedy for my throat, that would be great because I feel like not very good tonight. But I'm here because the story is too big. I didn't want to miss it. I didn't want to be home yelling at the television set. And by the way, on that subject, I want to thank Paul Lisnick, who did a great job sitting in for me last week when I was vacationing in California.
I was just going to say, I think your voice is improving as we are going through the show. Yes.
Well, it's fine. But I also digress, but I have this horrible canker sore. I have the world's most painful canker sore. And whether I'm eating or talking, I'm in a lot of pain tonight. So I'm playing through the pain as the athletes do. Let's go to Eduardo. He's listening to us on WCGO, which is our flagship station. He's got some questions or comments. Go ahead, Eduardo.
Yeah,
Happy New Year.
Very much. Yeah, good evening. My comment is, I thought the president so far has been cautious as far as his use of military. Venezuela, there hasn't been any airstrikes over there. And I have a question as far as Mr. Kim in Korea. Do you see him being cautious as far as that going along with that Christmas gift that we're still waiting for.
Let's talk to the colonel. Let everybody weigh in on that.
Well, I think this has been an eye-opening event for many different viewpoints. And if I was a person in the Kim family regime of thugs and thieves, wait, the Americans will actually do something? Wow. And that's going to be something that they're going to take and pay attention to. So,
does it help them in negotiations at all?
That remains to be seen. We've had even longer conversations with the Kim family than we have with the current leadership in Iran, and we are still technically in a state of armed conflict with North Korea.
How do you feel about the increased troops that are going over to the Middle East? I mean, you have 100 that are going to shore up the embassy in Baghdad, and then there was another 750 that was announced, and then another 2,500 that's going to Kuwait. What's going on in Kuwait?
Well, I think Kuwait is a strategic base from which the U.S. can operate in many different areas. And I am wary of troop buildups. I don't want to see a whole lot of it, but there must be good reason to do it. I think the president and his advisors are going to be very careful given the past history and what his campaign promises were in terms of adding more troops. But I believe that there's got to be a good reason for it.
What does this do to the Democratic primary debate within the party for the future of the party? Having this discussion about the president, what he does, and bringing up foreign policy and military action for the Democrats.
I'm a Democrat.
Right. You're a Democrat.
I'm
who
more.
doesn't use
I'm
the
more
word
hawkish.
Assassination, and we have one who uses that term.
No, because I'm okay with killing people. So call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. I'm a soldier. Then I'm a Democrat. But before anything, I want to say, so proud of the Marines that held the line, that held their fire, that protected the embassy. There was a platoon there, right? That's their job. And then, 100 more of them needed a ride. So Army assets, Apaches, took control of the airspace, brought in some other 100. And then, God bless the 82nd Airborne, America's Army. We show up, and we will stay there forever. So if the 82nd's there, it could be there for generations. The Marines have to be resupplied. They have a smaller scope.
American people want them to be there forever, especially when Donald Trump says he doesn't want to do that.
We have the capacity, and this is a card in our strategic interest that we get to play sometimes. Within hours, the 82nd Airborne does its rapid response.
Right.
There's another 3,500 that have already been mobilized. They kept their Christmas leave, they kept their New Year's, they enjoyed their family time, and they're ready to go back to work.
And they're going to Kuwait.
Right, to support and prepare. But I just want to say I'm really, really, really proud of those Marines because they kept their heads.
Can you have someone who's running for president as a Democrat saying exactly what you're saying?
I think you'll hear Pete say that.
Pete's going to say that.
Yeah, he'll say that. He'll say about
You think you'll say that?
Yeah, Pete's going to argue that he'll make smarter decisions, and he'll point out Biden's flaws, and Pete's going to try to be the smarter warrior, I think is his argument. Tulsi Gabbard, although she's fading in the polls, she's going to say, we shouldn't be in these kinds of wars. But now that's going to bring us to almost 17,000 troops in Kuwait stationed there. We've got 2,000 troops in Saudi Arabia guarding their oil fields. We've sold them billions of dollars in weapons. Donald Trump, I could imagine him saying, why isn't Saudi Arabia fighting their own wars? Are we fighting a proxy war on their behalf with Iran? Is that what's happening?
What is the role, in your opinion, and I realize you're not speaking for the Bernie Sanders campaign, you're speaking for Mark Costello. What is your opinion on the role of the U.S. military? Where should they be and what should they do?
Sure. America has a role to play. The first thing would be to get our moral credibility back. And how do you...
What does that mean?
So, when we're involved in overthrowing leaders through our past history, for example, in Iran. For over 20 years, we denied any involvement in the overthrow of Mossadegh, the Eisenhower administration. And that comes to light. And then the U.S. is viewed with suspicion. In the India Times today, it was reported that they were questioning, is America going to assassinate a Pakistani general who we don't like? In Venezuela, where we've been pushing for regime change there, is there going to become an imminent threat that's reported?
Take military action there.
But I'm afraid, are we on a slippery slope? So to protect and defend America's interests when they're not serving corporate
interests. We're going to come back and let everybody follow up on that, as well as those are listening. 1-800-723-8289. We've got this large military. How and when do we use them? What's your thought? Back shortly.
CSX moves forward, so do the rest of us.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago, and everybody is reading their Facebook posts in reaction to the show. David from San Francisco, let's bring you into the conversation. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, I think obviously assassination is the right word to use. And if you think back in some of the old legends about some of the old evil kings, that they would call for a peace treaty with their neighboring kingdoms, and they would call them into a big feast, and then they'd lock the doors and kill everybody. Mm-hmm. So you start looking at what Trump did, and there is now, there's now reportage that said that the feller that was killed was actually preparing for a negotiating settlement with the United States, and they knew where he was because of this activity. And
where did you read that, Dave?
That was mentioned on one of the other talk radio stations a couple of hours ago.
All right, haven't heard that one.
But this idea, whether or not Trump has created a parlay in order to kill someone he's declared an enemy, but it gets into an earlier, this discussion about whether or not the Middle East has always been fighting. That's such hokum. If you're a fan of Agatha Christie, she wrote a series of books about Iraq and archaeology in Iraq. She wrote a bunch of different mystery stories about it, and there were all of these stories about people walking around in top hats, and it was a whole kind of a civilized culture. And if you see the before and after photographs of whether it was Syria or Iran or Iraq or the various countries in the Middle East, Lebanon, Beirut, skyscrapers and
so what's your point, Dave? What's your point?
That the Lord Mountbatten and the oil companies, when the oil colonies were when the old colonies were forced to collapse and allowed to create republics, that Lord Mountbatten and the oil companies carved up the Middle East in such a way that they guaranteed that there would be strife. And so they drew lines through neighborhoods guaranteeing that you couldn't cross an international boundary without walking through a certain
Dave,
neighborhood.
as you're talking, your story's getting a little bit long, but Mark Costello is nodding along, so I'm going to let him do a follow-up, and then we're going to move on. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think where where David's going is that there was British interest controlling that oil. You had the creation of international borders or national borders that bring together conflicting ethnic groups and religious groups, and so I think he's saying that we're perpetuating a myth that these countries have always been backwards and fighting and not advanced, when there was a civil society there, a democratic-leaning society, but when Mossadegh moved to nationalize the oil, we were involved in overthrowing him, and that's led to the theocracy we're fighting and have been fighting my entire life.
So that's a narrative that it's all the Western powers' fault of what is happening in the Middle East since these countries were carved up. These countries wanted independence. They wanted to be out under the yoke of British imperialism, so they were carved up. There was no other way to do it. And it wasn't done with the intention of creating strife. I reject that notion wholeheartedly.
Ryan.
So about 100 years ago, the First Great War ended, and as a result, the Ottoman Empire, which included the modern-day Turkey and Syria and Lebanon, Levant, parts of Iraq, parts of Iran, it fell into a protectorate under the League of Nations and was gifted under the supervision of France, Belgium, and British colonial rule. And as Mark correctly said, then there was an effort to independence. And they did have this period where they emerged from the protectorate, but that coincided with the Second World War. Now, many of those in the Arab Crescent had strong leanings and sympathies towards the National Socialist, and the Germans put a lot of money and effort into that area. And it's not just British oil companies. So I'm sorry for my friend in San Francisco. There are a lot of different players and partners. And did the United States do bad things in Iran? Yep. And so did the Soviet Union. And so did every world power country would express their national interest across borders. But it's not this neat little snapshot in time where an oil company decides the fate of the world.
The nuclear pact with Iran, the president wanted to get rid of it. He talked about it during the campaign.
Yes.
He ended it. Now, Iran has said they are going to end it now. What impact will that have on the future of nuclear expansion in the Middle East, Josh?
The Trump administration...
Hated the plan.
I hated the Iran
Okay,
deal.
so now the deal is gone.
Yes.
So now, what do they do next? What do they do next?
You know what? What they do next, maybe they will continue to cheat, just like they were all along, and try to realize their nuclear ambitions. The Trump administration, I have full confidence, will not allow that to happen. Whether it's sabotage, whether it's cybersecurity, coordination again with Israel, like happened years ago, or whether it's a military strike.
I want to let everybody else respond to that. It's too big a story to talk about in the 15 seconds we have left, so we'll talk about it at the beginning of the next hour. Thanks to our guests for being with us this evening. Thanks for you being with us as well. Thanks to you for putting up with my horrible voice this evening, but we'll try to make through another hour coming up shortly. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for being with us.
Welcome to the world, 2116. You can fly across town in minutes. or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars. And solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Today, fresh fruits and vegetables will go from a field in California to a grocer in Miami. A bottle of beer from Eagle Pass will journey to a restaurant in Manhattan. A 2x4 in Oregon will find its way to a townhome in Denver. A hybrid will say goodbye to Detroit and hello to a showroom in Austin. While a steel beam will leave a mill in Illinois for a high-rise in Phoenix. And a flat screen in China will head to an electronics store in Memphis. Because today, as every day, wherever you find business, you'll find us.